I pledge
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, before we get started, Amber was unexpectedly not able to make it today, so there's a couple agenda items that we won't be able to do. Agenda item number 5, the WQIAB rebate. We're going to move that to next week because we don't have enough board members to vote on that. And then the other one is item number 8, the comprehensive plan review and changes of chapters 1 through 10. We'd like the whole board to be present for that as well. So those 2 items will not be addressed today, even though they are on the agenda. I'm going to kick it off with public comments. Anybody in the audience have something? Or anybody on Zoom? All right, if there are no public comments, we have Judith here to talk to us about the reval and what that means and how it gets calculated and what you can expect.
Hello, everybody. I'm Judith Mansky, the assessor for the town. And so I'm here to talk about the revaluation that is going to go into effect in 2025. So basic overview is the valuation of property is used to establish a rate, and that rate then determines how much of the budget each property owner is then responsible for. Simply put, we establish a market value while the county, town, school, library, fire districts, they all create a budget, and then that budget or levy is divided to then give you the tax rate. And then we establish value by comparing sales of similar properties to other properties, and that analysis will tell us what each property is likely to sell for on the open market. Next slide. And then, so now why do a reassessment, right? Reassessment or an assessment reflects your property's market value. As market values continue to either increase or decrease, assessments do not reflect these changes. So some property owners could pay more than their fair share, while others may pay less than their fair share. And reassessments are intended to maintain equity and fairness amongst the community. On the next slide, why reassess each year? It's important to do that because real estate market has risen dramatically for the past couple of years, and annual reassessments are the best way to ensure that all assessments are kept fair and equitable. As illustrated previously, the values in different areas could fluctuate. I mean, the job of the assessor is to maintain an equitable percentage of market value. And that being said, if market values have increased since in the last assessment, hypothetically, values in one area can increase faster than those in a different area. And then area 1 could be paying more or less than area 2 because they're not being reassessed properly. And since we have not been able to do a revaluation since 2021, our percentage has dropped from 100% down to 68% in just a couple of years. And a drop in equalization rate will cause certain exemption amounts to drop as well. And to keep those exemption amounts at their maximum limit, we need to reassess each year. And now, does the assessor determine taxes? No. Taxes are determined by the county legislature, town board, school board, library, fire district, not the assessor. So each board determines the amount of taxes it needs to raise to meet their budgets. And then we divide that number by the total taxable assessed value. And that arrives at that rate, at a rate. That rate is then multiplied to your assessed value to determine your fair share of taxes, okay? So then I have a little thing there that says the county, town, school, library equals the budget. Okay, so now what does the town do with the extra money when you do a reval? There is no extra money because it's still the same budget that needs to be raised. It's still based on the county, town, school, library budgets. Okay, so now this is an example of what the rates were. And in 2023, your rate was $6 per thousand, right? So if you were assessed at $1 million, you were paying $6,600 in taxes, roughly. Now, in 2024, which has not been finalized yet, because we're working on that, that will be released December 9th, once we get confirmation from the county. We're estimating that it's gonna be, if you have an assessed value of $1 million, you will be paying $6,979 per $1 million. So now in 2025, if we do a revaluation, we are estimating based on the total taxable assessed value and what the budgets could potentially be. And that will give you, if you have an assessment of 1.3 million, your taxes would be $7,526. Now, that being said, your assessment, as you see there, the assessment went up 30%, but then we did a budget increase as well of 8% across all budgets, not just one budget, but all budgets. So your tax rate went down, but the taxes still increased slightly. But the good news is that the tax rate went down. So if you apply that towards all properties, in theory, taxes would remain relatively the same. Okay. Next slide is, my taxes will increase if my assessment is adjusted. Well, it depends. So being at 68% now, going to 100, an easy number to choose is 680,000, right? So if your assessment goes from 680,000 up to $1 million, your taxes would remain the same. If your assessment was 680,000 and you go to less than $1 million, your taxes would be less. And now if your assessment is 680,000 and you go up to $1 million, your taxes would, or you go up higher than $1 million, excuse me, your taxes would be higher. Now this is an illustration that the state has on their website. We also have it on the assessor website. And this is a great illustration to show you the different numbers that are available and what different potential options would be depending on how things play out. But again, these are all rough numbers. Nothing is set in stone. Okay. Now for the exemptions. On a previous slide, I had mentioned that certain exemptions do not stay at 100% if we are not at 100%. So at the bottom, we'll go over that. But if you still think your taxes are too high and you don't have any property tax exemptions, I encourage you to come into our office and talk about applying for any of these exemptions. So if Shelter Island is your primary residence, you may be eligible for any of the following. So basic star, your income has to be less than 500,000. And enhanced star, you need to be over the age of 65 and your income has to be less than 107,000. For the senior or disabled, again, over the age of 65 and your income needs to be less than 58,400. And that is a very important exemption because that's a sliding scale. Depending on where your income lands on that sliding scale, you could get up to 50% off of your property taxes. But again, that's for seniors and disabled only over the age of 65. And now the veterans exemption is the one that's affected by us not being at 100%. The veterans exemption right now is only at the 68% of what their maximum limits would be. So for wartime, you would be getting eligible for 75, but you're only receiving 51,000, right? And combat veterans would receive an additional 50,000, but they're only receiving 34. And disabled veterans could be receiving 250,000, but they're only receiving 170. So I think that's another important thing, that if the town is willing to give these veterans their exemption, we should fulfill the proper limits. Okay. So the next slide is timeline and dates, right? So now, in January of this year, or January 25, I'm going to submit our data to the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance, Office of Real Property, and they are going to verify our information. Once they verify it in February, they're going to send it back to us and approve everything. And then we will send out on March 1st what we call the assessment disclosure letters. And this letter explains what your new assessed value is and what the potential tax implication is based on this past year's tax rate and what potential taxes could be. And those are the letters that people will see, and you can then come into my office, talk to me about the new assessment, talk to me about the potential taxes. I will answer any questions that I can. And then May 1st is when the tentative roll publication date is. So then there will be a second time for grievance from May 1st through May 20th. And then after May 20th, that is their final day for grievance. July 1st is the final roll publication date. And then December 10th is when taxes will be sent out. And that is when the new assessment will be listed on the tax bill. And any questions or concerns? You guys, people are on there. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's Kathleen.
Just have to come up.
Come up to the podium so people can hear you on the mic.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Okay, well, firstly, thank you. I know this is like kind of a hard table job. So appreciate that. Maybe if you could just help us understand a couple of things. We've got a pretty big change going from 2021 last appraisal to 2025, going back to full market value. Could you just share with the board and the public, when will the analysis be shared with this group? The shift analysis and the fairness analysis that's done by either you guys or the state so that folks can better understand the appraisal process? And the second question, when will the mandated public hearings happen? They're usually required when you have such a big catch-up reappraisal.
So,
Just, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's no problem. So, March 1st is that letter that will be telling what the analysis will be. And that begins the time for public hearing. And you are welcome to come into our office and chat with us at that point, because that is when the analysis will be complete, and then that's when the data will be available.
And I'm going to assume that come March 1st, when the letters are coming out, we'll have you come back in to explain to the public why they're going to be receiving the letter, what it means, what they can look for. So we'll keep people posted as this rolls out.
Yes, absolutely.
Just ask a clarifying question, sorry. So are you describing kind of the enhanced process that's required because of the big catch-up reappraisal? Okay, so there's extra public hearings that wouldn't otherwise occur. I'm just wondering if this could be like put on the calendar somehow for you guys so that the public could know about that.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mhm. But again, publication date would be March 1st, so it'd be at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Michael?
Good afternoon, Michael Chapman. I actually have two questions. First one is, that it seems only logical that year over year, the basis of the improvements within the community in terms of new houses, additions, alterations rise. And we tend to not think about that when we're analyzing our budgets, saying, oh, don't worry, the tax is only going to increase by whatever it is, 7%. Well, there is a factor that is growing the revenues, and that's all new construction. So you keep that number so we know to what extent we have really increased our expenditures, not only in terms of the previous taxpayers, but the new basis with all new improvements included.
Well, I can say that the past couple of years,
It's running quite a bit.
that's what has been added to the tax roll, or the assessment roll. Those are the things that have been added, and that's it, the new construction.
Right. Not the reappraisal component.
Yes, correct.
Do you have a sense of what new construction values have been over these moving periods?
Yeah, they vary dramatically from certain smaller residences to larger residences. So it's hard to say, but what are you looking for?
A number. In other words, if you build $10 million houses in town, I'd like to know how much improvements have entered in each year to our basis. Because I think it gives people a different perspective. Not only have the tax rolls gone up, but we've had a new source of income, which is new improvements to the community.
Okay.
That's
I don't-
just,
I don't have that figure. I have to get you that figure because I don't want to misquote.
and the other question I have is more in the category of the burden, and the burden is shared by the taxpayers. Has there ever been any thoughts or consideration within this community, or are there any pilot programs, payments in lieu of taxes?
There is one, yes.
And who is that one? What institution represents that one?
The Lightbug? Yes.
So payments in lieu of taxes are, for those who don't know, are for nonprofits. And nonprofits are generally exempt from taxes.
They are.
But in some practices, in some community, nonprofits pay for the services consumed. They don't pay general tax basis, but they're paid for fire emergency services and road work. So as a mechanism to lower the tax burden on the citizens, would this board or the town be consider capturing the expenses or the services that are consumed by nonprofits? And I don't have an opinion on that as to whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. The opinion I have is if it lowers my taxes, it's a good thing. But I don't know whether, in some way we're penalizing profits or not, and whether they can absorb that cost or not. Thank you.
Does anybody online have any questions for Judith regarding the reval? Elise?
Hi, thanks. Elise Horning. Just a quick question. Was the income for the primary residence tax exemption income, that was household income?
It is, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have a question? Judith, online or in the room? All right. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm sure we'll have you back in March.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. The next topic on the agenda is the wetlands permit application for 169 Ram Island Drive, the Loftus Hills in Tam. We have a draft resolution. Did everyone get a chance to look it over and see if they're okay with it?
I have some issues with the project.
Okay.
You've always minimized, for town code, minimized activity in the 75-foot buffer. And accepting the 100 square foot exemption that we will allow. The entire 75-foot buffer of this project is totally regraded and recontoured, totally disturbed.
Mhm.
The current height of the bluff is 11 to 13 feet. The bulkhead's going to be 9 feet. That's planned. That's a severe cut, recontouring of the entire the entire buffer. I think the elevation should remain at 11 to 13 feet.
You want to increase the size? Because originally, before it deteriorated, I think, wasn't the bulkhead 13 feet?
I think the existing bluff varies from 11 to 13. What's left there?
Yeah, so I think the bulkhead that they're trying to replace was 13 feet, and they're proposing to bring it down to 9.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm just so that concept that there's a whole recontouring of the entire buffer. Regrading, recontouring. And usually whenever we try to minimize the 75-foot protection zone, we'll give 100 square feet of a building exemption. But we're very, usually, or most always, we're very protective of the 75-foot zone. And in this case, it's totally dismissed. Any redesign will eliminate the need for the creation of ramps to allow access to the newly created beach. The flat stone ramps are 10 by 24 and 15 by 40 feet. And there's stairs involved that are going to be built on concrete foundation. So we're approaching just under 1,000 square feet of structure within the vegetative buffer.
I don't know that that's accurate, Albert, because the ramps are just part of the revetment. It's just a flatter surface. They're not going to leave it rough like the rest of the revetment. And the stairs, they shrunk down to 100 square feet.
Right.
So-
There's two ramps, one 10 by 24,
They're-
flat stone ramp.
They're part of the revetment, though. Like, it's all part of the same structure. Instead of keeping it rough, that they're just going to try to level out and make flatter.
And 15 by 40 feet, which allows access down to the created beach.
Why would we not allow access to the beach?
Why would we allow creation of the beach? Why do we allow recontouring the whole wetlands buffer?
Well, so I look at this, we have a failed bulkhead, which has already significantly washed out that entire area that is going to be beach. And it's exposed the really, really old bulkhead and all of the debris and trash that they used to backfill it. So it's actually a shrinking of the bulkheaded area. It'll be a removal of all the car parts and typewriters and everything else that's being exposed by the bulkhead washing out. So it's actually a shrinking of the bulkhead, and then the rock revetment in the beach area is a more natural, it's a more natural solution than a full-on bulkhead would be. There's
The
less
beach-
CCA, there's less, I mean, stones are an inert, material to be using here, and they're natural to,
We usually
natural to
allow,
the
Meg,
area.
we usually allow, don't we, a 4-foot pervious path to the shoreline. This has, I think, 3 paths and 2 ramps.
but I think it has one path through the lawn, and that's like a staircase that they shrank to 100 square feet. But then the ramps that you're referencing are part of the rock revetment. They're part of that retaining wall. It's not like they're additional structures in a vegetated area. They're part of the stonework.
Well, the
It's just,
revetment, yeah, but there is a flat stone ramp
where?
to get access down to the beach area.
So he's
Where?
talking about this pit.
That's part of the revetment.
No, there's 2 ramps, the revetment and the flat stone ramp.
I'm not seeing the flat stone ramp that you're talking about. Can you show it to me?
Right here.
That's part of the revetment.
It's flat stone ramp.
This here, this is where the rock revetment starts. This is where the bulkhead returns.
And this
This
is,
is a rock
this is-
revetment. This is part of that.
it's a flat stone ramp
It's-
to allow access down
It's
to the beach.
part of the revetment.
It's a structure.
It doesn't make, so is the revetment.
Like, here's, okay, let me just cut to the chase.
Okay.
I don't want to, whatever. The applicants to evaluate alternatives that lessen impacts to the wetlands, section 129-5A. Reasonable alternatives are presumed to be available. Has the applicant submitted information to describe alternatives and any configurations that have less adverse impacts on the wetland. I haven't seen any, if they have.
Didn't they, building it this way, or using the rock revetment was a requirement of, not the health department.
Well, the
but
DEC,
DEC.
this is what, they proposed two options to the DEC, and this is the one the DEC preferred,
Yeah, they.
was my understanding, is that they pitched one that was more of a full-on bulkhead and one that was the bulkhead with the rock revetment, and that was what the DEC preferred.
Yeah.
That was my understanding from the presentation that we got.
Albert, you're not wrong.
Right.
Okay? There's a lot of work going on in this area. But the four of us went down to this property and looked, and it was an absolute mess. And it wasn't a good thing for the wetlands, the condition that it's in. I mean, just where the bulkhead is falling away, there's like old water heater buried in the ground and the typewriter. They just took junk that they didn't want to take to the dump and stuck it in there and covered it with dirt.
Well, and.
We're supposed to sort of reduce the nonconformity whenever we can. And this is a dramatic reduction of the nonconformity and improvement to the life and health of the wetland. I mean, that's how I see it.
Okay, all right. We're recontouring and building within the wetlands buffer that usually is protected.
So.
Very much so. We minimize any disturbance in that area. There's an 11 to 13 foot bluff there. It's totally being recontoured.
But when we were there, it had already been significantly
recontoured it.
disturbed. Yeah, and I mean, nature is actively recontouring it as we speak. Part of the reason why I'm not as upset with this application is because no matter what, they have to do all the work from the landward side. They can't do it from the water. So no matter what, they're going to have excavators and loaders and everything in this wetlands area. No matter which option they choose, it has to be done from the land. So with this option, we have a full revegetation plan. It'll be a healthier area, I think, when they're done. The explanation was that there's no physical way for them to do it from the water side because of all the rocky shore, because of all the boulders in the water. So no matter what, this area is going to be completely torn up, whether they put in just a straight on full bulkhead or if they go with this. And that's kind of something that you can't avoid in this situation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, so.
I mean, this would be a hard no if there was never a bulkhead there. If it was all natural waterfront, of course you can't do this. That would be crazy. But the fact that there was a bulkhead there that's failed, that is actually now messing up the wetlands and beginning to affect the two properties on either side, this is going to improve the wetlands and the wildlife and the aquatic life, rather than let it continue to deteriorate and let all the garbage that's buried there.
There's a lot of activity in the wetlands, without a doubt, and there's a lot of structure going in. Okay?
Agreed.
And our code says we ask for alternatives. This was the wish. This is the applicant's wish. This is what he wants. They want. We asked for alternatives. That's all. That's all I'm saying. We asked for that, and I haven't seen any.
There were two plans, and the DEC picked this one, and they work with the DEC to make them happy, make themselves happy.
So I guess, Albert, my question to you is what alternatives would you have preferred to this plan?
I don't know. I'd like to see something.
But these are things that should have been brought up during the public hearing, not after we closed it.
No, I agree. So I hear you. I understand that you don't like the amount of activity that's going to happen in this zone.
Neither do I, by the way.
I mean, it's
I just think it's
not
better than the alternative.
ideal, but no matter what, it's going to get disturbed, no matter how they have to repair it, because they have to do it from the landward side.
This is a like. This is what they like. This is what they want. All I'm saying is I'd like to see alternatives to less work within this vegetative buffer. And they haven't presented that, or we haven't asked for it, whatever the case.
So, I mean, rock revetments are also something that the Peconic Estuary Partnership is trying to move people towards to get away from bulkheading, because they are more natural, they allow.
No, I
for-
know that. I know.
So, I mean, they are, by their nature, do require a little more work in that vegetative buffer. So are we going to say this is the preferred option of the environmental organizations in the Peconic Estuary, but because we don't want to step in our 75-foot buffer, we're not going to allow those, and you can only do bulkheading? I mean, at some point, you have to come up with a balance, and there has to be a little give and take. This is not like a marshy wetlands area. This has already been filled, and it's already been recontoured, it's already has,
Sort of been,
there's,
ruined.
I mean, this is not pristine in any fashion at this point. So when it's done, I think the work will be better than when it started. I think it'll be a healthier environment than.
I'm just looking for alternatives, Mac, that's all. It's completely reconfigured, the whole wetlands buffer, completely reconfigured. And that's something that we're always been very protective of.
Well, there was an alternative, and they worked with the DEC to come up with this. And it's a mixture of their desires and the DEC's desires. From
The
what,
creation of a beach,
that might have been their desire.
there's
The
a lot,
DEC
there's a
thought,
lot here that,
You know,
you know,
we
is,
kind of don't.
Yeah, but if you look at it, in order to shorten the bulkhead, you have to have some step downs, because the neighbor is all beach, right? So you're going from this hard existing bulkhead that's now washed out completely, and the elevations are almost the same for this property and the neighbor's property, which is a natural beach into marsh. So this is a cleaner transition to the neighbor's property than a hard bulkhead would be. Standing at the property, it makes sense why this is what they're looking for. The bulkheading
it
failed.
makes sense to me, Mac, that's all. It did to you, it didn't make sense to me. I mean, I don't know what to say.
Okay,
I just like to see some alternatives, that's all. That's what my position. You guys go, if you don't feel that way,
all right. I mean, I feel like the failed bulkhead is creating this naturally. And
Yeah,
that
if
was
this
what
if this was undisturbed waterfront,
right, it would be a different
absolutely
story.
not, we can't do this.
But that's not the
We can't
situation.
do anything close to it.
but
But
the bluff is still there. Yeah, it's washed out, it's deteriorated,
It's gonna
but
continue
it's still
to wash
11 to
out.
13-foot bluff that exists there.
and it's gonna continue to wash out.
Right.
So you just want them, I mean, the bulkhead certainly has to be rebuilt, because not only is it continuing to wash out on this property, but it's being affected two properties on either side, because it was built in the first place. So it's a non-conforming, unwanted use, but their plan is actually lessening the effect of it.
That's your opinion, Ben.
Yeah, my opinion, lowering the bulkhead, building this rock revetment to better absorb wave energy, so that wave energy isn't transferred up and down the beach. I don't know. I think this is a better solution than leaving it alone or just replacing the bulkhead. You're gonna recreate a beach, it's gonna be better for the wildlife.
The beach is up on top of the bulkhead. The beach is going to be a personal beach that they're creating on their property, on the vegetative buffer. It's not a natural beach that's occurring on the shoreline. But, you know,
So really, your alternatives now are, they would have to start from scratch, reapply, and start all over, or you have a vote. You have a quorum, so you have this on for a special meeting, and then the majority rules. Those are your two alternatives.
I mean, can we pass this with a 2-1 vote, or do we need?
Yeah, you have a quorum.
Albert, I assume you are not in favor of this application?
I'd like to see alternatives.
The appropriate time would have been during the hearing process for that request. I mean, I feel like this is pretty after the fact. or during the WMAC review process. I don't know, Benjamin, how do you feel about this?
I've never loved this project because it is a huge
It's a
disturbance.
big project, yeah.
Yeah, and I would never, ever support something like this in the normal circumstances.
Right.
But I think this is a drastic improvement to what's there now and what's going to happen
Mhm.
in the near future. And, you know, the fact that these homeowners are willing to spend, I mean, huge amount of money
Yeah.
to make this happen.
It's a big project.
I think it's a benefit to the town, I really do, and the wildlife and the shorefront. And so, yeah, I vote for it.
Okay, I mean, because my concern is that we have a failed bulkhead, actively failed, currently washing out. There's a lot of debris behind it. If we take this back and tell them to go back to the drawing board, that's a couple of months before it'll come back to us to even get looked at again. And I feel that a lot of damage can be done in that amount of time.
Over the
And I-
winter, with the winter
Also have
storm.
to amend the DEC
And
approval.
exactly, they'll have to go.
Once they get through our process.
Correct. And so I feel like that is a bigger detriment to the environment and the community and the neighborhood than what they're proposing.
I feel that this applicant has chosen this path. That they looked to get an application to build their house. They built a new house and they put off doing this work that probably should have been done initially and it wasn't. And now we're accommodating because they're back against the wall, winter's coming.
If the bulkhead hadn't failed, then sure, we could take it back to the drawing board. But it's going to get to the point where it's really going to be a problem with the failed bulkhead. So I'm comfortable doing the special meeting and moving forward with this, if you're comfortable with that.
I'm not comfortable with it, but
Well,
I'm
I
willing to
mean,
do it.
I feel like it's-
So,
yeah. You understand. I'm
Yeah,
not clicking my heels together and dancing about it. I do think it's something that we should do.
and I also, just to touch on another side, I don't think it sets a big precedent, and that would be my big concern. This is,
And there's always a question of precedent being set.
you know, and.
Don't dismiss that.
No, I'm saying I don't think it sets a big one. I really don't. I
I
think-
mean, it's just completely redoing the whole wetlands buffer in front of this house. Just completely contouring it and making major change. That's a precedent. Don't say there's not a precedent.
Okay.
I mean,
I didn't say it wasn't one, so it wasn't a big one.
No. I do feel like there's unique circumstances here with the bulkhead failure.
Plus, this isn't the zoning board. Zoning board, there's case law that, you know, they're more stricter with precedent, even though it can be distinguished. Here, there is no real case law saying that you have to adhere to previous precedent. And even, you know, future boards correct wrongs of prior boards, so.
Okay.
there's precedent being set. Here,
It's
with
not-
this.
It's not hard and fast. That's my only point.
All right, but this precedent, we hear that, it's been thrown at us. You know, there's what, 39, 41 mega mansions built on the island. You don't tell me that I can't do one. Look, you've already approved 39 or whatever the
No,
number.
you're absolutely, I'm just saying,
No, that's all.
no, I agree with you. I'm just saying from a legal perspective
Yeah.
that, but of course, you know,
Every time a board does anything, it has the potential to set a precedent. It's just the nature of the beast. Okay, so we'll move on from this one. Secret fees, item number 4, secret fees transfer onto the applicant. So,
This one?
yeah. One of the things that came up during the budget season is that we're spending significantly more money on SECRA. And we're wondering if it's possible legally, if there's a route to making applicants pay part of the SECRA costs or the assessments that we're doing.
Which sometimes are de minimis, but sometimes they're actually quite large.
Yes, they're tending to scale with the scope of the project. So if you have a very large project, there's much more expense to running the secra. If you have a small scale project, it's not as expensive.
Yeah, other municipalities have staff in-house that handle it, so it gets
Right.
absorbed in that. We don't, so we have to farm it all out, and that's the cost. So I think absolutely you can pass it along to the, because you have the unfettered ability to set fees, right? And this is just another form of a fee. It's passing it along to the applicant.
Yeah, and what the question is it fair for every taxpayer to pay a piece of these fees which, which are associated with?
Everybody pays for one person's application. No.
I think since January, 40,000, about
Yeah.
$1,000 of taxpayer money was spent on consultants reviewing individuals' applications.
Individuals' applications,
And
which
it's
doesn't seem
it's really
fair.
good to mention. I was gonna just try to skirt around that. But it's such a large number. And for the town financials and budget, it's actually quite significant.
I feel like this is a short-term solution to kind of a long-term problem. I think in the long run, we're going to have to hire someone in-house who can do all of these things. But until we can
That's all
find
taken.
that person, I do understand that. But I mean, the needs of the community are changing, the demands being put upon the town are changing, and so we will need more professional assistance in the future. But until we have those people, we still need to provide these services. And right now, the best way for us to do them is per diem until we can find the right puzzle piece. But it's also not fair to the entire community to be paying for individuals' applications. So in order to do this, we're going to have to amend various sections of the town code, right? We're going to have to go through the wetlands code, the site plan code, the subdivision code. What else? Zoning board? Is there a zoning board that require, well,
Potentially.
potentially
Permits.
special permits.
Stuff.
So we'll have to amend each one individually to allow for
But
that.
certain, like our wetlands say, we can, impose fees via resolution. So arguably, we can just do it via resolution.
All right, so we'll have to go through and identify exactly what changes will have to be made if this is something that the board is in favor of.
Yeah.
Both of
Yes.
you? Okay.
Yes.
All right. And so then the procedure for actually implementing it, so would be that prior to issuing the permit, the town clerk would receive payment for whatever those services. So the town clerk would be responsible for the billing and receipt of payment, and then they'd issue the permit once the debt is cleared.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. I mean, that seems like a simple enough way to manage it. Does that work for you, Amber?
Yeah, the bills.
Yes. Okay. Also, I just wanted to check. All right,
Since you're the town clerk.
exactly.
We're talking about you like you're not here.
Check with her. All right, so if everyone's comfortable with that, we'll put that on to flesh out more next week or whenever Amber comes back. The next agenda item, number 5, the WQIAB rebates, we won't be discussing those today because we don't have a quorum to do that. I have to recuse myself, and then it's only Albert and Benjamin. Number 6, the WAC mission statement, the Water Advisory Committee mission statement. Benjamin, you had some recommended changes to that.
Yes.
The committee discussed it and I believe adopted pretty much all of your changes. Did you see anything that you had concerns about or disagreed with? It was
No.
good?
I think they adopted all of my edits.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think the consensus was there was no problem.
okay, yeah.
The mission
That was my take on it too. So if you guys are good with that, we can put it on for adoption.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Flying into its agenda. I see that Miriam is on. So the next topic that we have on the agenda is community housing, the RFP versus an RFQ. The Community Housing Board has been working very diligently to move housing forward, and we're really at that next critical phase of getting us to shovels in the ground. And so it's time to put out a request for help. And so the committee sent us an RFP, and we looked it over, and now that it's a new board looking at the request, we have some questions. So the Community Housing Board's attorney has been gracious enough to come on so that we can ask questions and get clarification from her on what's being put forward, what the process is, what we think would be the most expeditious way to move this program forward. And so just before she gets started and before we start asking questions, I know Bill had comments he wanted to say, and then.
Couple of comments.
All right, and then we'll have Miriam introduce herself and we'll kind of go into.
Bill Mastro, before I start, can I have 30 other seconds to just address what Albert said on the wetlands permit, just a little suggestion?
No, I mean,
To change the resolution, so it's not so you say in the resolution it's unique, so it sets less of a precedent.
Unfortunately, there was a public hearing, you really can't.
Oh, there's already, okay.
yeah,
Because I thought you might be able to do it in the resolution to avoid the precedent. All right, enough of that.
all right. On the housing.
Back to housing. I am not speaking as a member of the housing committee. I want to make that clear because we haven't come to any consensus as a committee. I'm speaking as an individual. Back when the referendum was under consideration, we had that wonderful meeting at the school. I had spoken there in favor of the referendum. And one of the things I said was, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And at this stage of the game, the most important aspect of what we are doing is to move the project along and so we can get shovels in the ground as quickly as possible. That should be right at the top of everything. Nothing we do in terms of RFP, RFQ is necessarily going to be perfect. So what is the quickest way? What is the way that is the path of least resistance? And no matter which way we go, there are certain things that are still going to be necessary, certain things that are still going to have to work their way through. There's going to be bidder conferences. Within the bidder conferences, there's going to be questions. Those questions are going to have to be reviewed, changes are going to have to be made, and revision refreshments is going to have to go back to anyone who still wants to bid. The most important document that we're going to be doing is going to be a contract once we know which way we're going to go. And the covenants that are in that contract are really where we need to make our biggest focus. So those things, I don't think we should lose track of that and try to be sure that we're issuing the perfect document. That I think is essential. Whether it's an RFQ or an RFP, I see ways of going down both paths. Given what I have heard and some conversations, it's probably best at this point to use the RFQ. Because I think it's probably the way to get a shovel in the ground the quickest. I still would like David Doyle to take a look from a financial model perspective at where we could go with both. Is the RFQ potentially adding some additional costs, or is it actually saving some costs? I'm not sure. We also want to be able to say We also want to be able to save the monies available, that $2 million, which means the quickest way is the best way.
Right.
So finally, I think from what I have heard, one of the big issues is the issue of plan design. And we went out to the community. We showed them what I would call a concept, not necessarily a design. And I think it's important that whatever path we go down, we be able to keep that interaction with the community, that this is the concept that we want. Not that we would have to put the actual design into the RFQ, if we go with RFQ methodology, but that there was community buy-in to what we were going to do, and that it was going to stay with the characteristics of the community. So as we go back and forth on this, I ask you, please do this so that we can get it done as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, Miriam. Let you introduce yourself.
I'm Miriam Milgram, and my firm and I specifically, we were hired to represent the community board in connection with this project. And I have a lot of experience building affordable housing for a great deal of municipalities or not-for-profits that work with municipalities, from from East Hampton, Southampton, all the way to Nassau County. We're based in Nassau County and Garden City. So in connection with the benefits of an RFQ versus an RFP, it's there are benefits on either side. From quick conversations from your last meeting, it appears that the town board in its discretion would favor an RFQ. Probably the overall cost of the project and construction would be reduced with an RFQ because an RFQ would definitely take this project out of WIX, and WIX raises costs tremendously. Since your last board meeting, there was, I didn't attend, but from what I understood, there were discussions. So at the request of a couple of the community board members, I was asked to draft an RFQ, but I didn't have a lot of the basics, in terms of, so I just took the liberty of drafting an RFQ. It's easier to go from an RFP to an RFQ because you're basically taking out as opposed to adding. So it didn't overly, it didn't mean that I was going from a totally new set document. When you read it through, you'll see very similar language, except an emphasis on qualifications. But again, I haven't had input from the town board or the housing board in terms of very specifics, but I took it based on, what other clients have asked for me to include in RFQ. And I took the liberty of putting together a first draft. Now, if you go for if you choose in your discretion to go with an RFQ, what the town board will be relying on is the qualifications of the successful bidder. Because you're not going to have the plans and the budget and all of the backup you would for an RFP. But even under the draft of the RFP that was presented to the town board, it wasn't really fleshed out all of every single detail of the plan, because by requiring the successful offer on just one entity to bid on that could run afoul of the WIX, because the town can't be the party that's bidding on these contracts, because if that's the case, then the Wicks law would apply. So, that's why you're creating this level of fiction in either case, that you would be entering into a development agreement with, not even a fiction, it's the reality, especially if you go for the RFQ route, that you would be entering into an agreement with the developer, and then the developer would be, or its affiliate or partner would be entering into a ground lease with the town for the land. And as part of the development agreement, it would be the developer that would be building out the units. So by it being a private enterprise, that legally takes it out of Wicks. And that's a tremendous savings. And I think with an RFQ, it makes it very clear that that's the developer's responsibility. However, I'm looking at it pros and cons. The only issue with an RFQ is you're going to really have to, as the town board, is really rely on qualifications. You're not going to know when you're selecting the developer, other than the qualifications, what the ultimate design and as built the project will look like. And so I would definitely suggest, if you go the RFQ route, and I would add it into the agreements, and I was thinking about how best to protect the town, is I don't know if you have, what kind of detailed plans you have. I have here that it's in consultation with the town board, but whatever plan is developed at the, and at what stage, having not only the development agreement require the developer to cause the building and construction in accordance with those design plans, but also have a reverter clause and a termination of the lease, immediately if the plans are not built in accordance. That's the best way and then of course relying on, your planning department, to be reviewing the plans every step of the way. Because from what I understand from the community board, having those meetings with the community and having their buy-in is something that's critical to the town. And that's the only drawback that I could see from going the route of an RFQ, is you lose the control, because you're relying specifically on qualifications at that point. On the other hand, without expecting the bidders to come up with detailed proposed designs, you might be broadening your pool of possibilities, and that could definitely be a positive. But these are all, judgment and policy decisions that I would recommend that you consider. The other alternative, the RFP, is you have more control. So I think those are the big differences between the two. When I drafted the generic RFQ, I didn't go through, but or change, because it really is the discretion of the town board, the evaluation criteria and the allocated, but it may be something worth looking into if you are converting to an RFQ, because you're not going to really have anything specific. You'll have some specifics. You'll have every developer bidding say, yes, we'll build in accordance with your vision, but you're not going to have the actual plans at this time.
Right.
So that, again, I put in some of the knowledges, familiarity with designs, holistic designs, all those good things. But again, you would be taking a look at that. It would also, an RFQ would also enable the process, I think, to go forward sooner, because I do think from what I hear, there's been a lot of discussion about how detailed the plans have to be, and the design protocol and whatnot. And as Bill had said in his original introduction, that that would be for later agreements, and it just seems that you may be losing time in debating what should be included in an RFP anyway. But if you go with an RFQ, you can't even require it. So it takes it off the table because it's just a different type of document. So I guess that kind of summarizes it. It could be an RFP, an RFQ, but I think from what I'm hearing about your various discussions, it appears that, the town is leaning towards an RFQ. So like I said, that's why I took the opportunity of, taking what I already did in consultation with the community board and, converting that document to an RFQ. So you have both.
Marion, would you mind just taking a second maybe to explain Wick's Law? Because I don't think general public knows what that is. And for me, it's the big sticking point here.
Yeah. Well, Wick's Law has been in the books, I don't know, 100 years, maybe. I'm being facetious, but a very long time. I don't even, definitely, I don't know. We learned it in law school way back when. It never left us. Basically, municipal projects, when a municipality is offering up or is looking to hire construction services, and you have to, for projects over $1 threshold, and I forgot what the threshold is on Long Island.
1.5.
Yeah,
1.5 million.
yeah, exactly. A few years ago, they had increased it, but not by much. But basically, you can't just bid for a design project as a public entity. And it's a law that can't be modified, you can't make a change. You're either, if the municipality directly entered into a contract for development, you have to comply with WICS, which means you have to have the electric by a separate company, general contract by this company, another contract by this company. And, it just adds tremendous cost to any municipal project. There are ways around it. Larger projects, for instance, all the redevelopment of the Long Island Railroad and the expansion. I don't know, the state was able to develop this without utilizing WICS and doing some creative work to bypass WICS on that. But it is very, very difficult. And that's why municipalities, look for a vehicle, if you're working with private developers, to give the developer control over the project and have the developer, hire the contractors, because the developers are not subject to WICS. And it's a question of how much and what takes it out of WICS is because the WICS is hiring. The WICS will be hiring the contractors, and if the municipality doesn't have control over the hiring, it takes that project out of WICS. For instance, when I'm working on projects for housing authorities, when there needs to be a rebuilding or renovation, both, I represented both Southampton and East Hampton on those. The property was transferred to an entity or ground lease to an entity that entity is the entity that entered into all of the the various contracts. And then it's a design build contract. It is not an issue because it's not subject to WIX, those projects, because it's not the housing authority that's engaging in deciding basically, who's going to be hired to do what. Okay.
I
And
mean,
probably
the-
with an RFQ, in thinking about it, in terms of the policy decisions, doing it one way or the other, the only thing from a legal point of view, I think the RFQ makes it one point even further removed. But again, it has to be the appetite of the town board to recognize that you are giving up control to the developer. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But also, one additional point, at least the one that keeps me up at night, is by going with the RFP and being subject to WIX, the community housing board and or this town board has to vet, interview, and performance manage every trade. And where's the expertise in this town for that? So.
Now, with the RFQ, you keep saying that we're giving up all of, it's all on the developer now. But as the landlord, essentially, because we are leasing the land, do we get to sign off on the designs that they are creating? We get to give them, the committee's already done a tremendous amount of research on what the community likes, what the community does not like, what they want to see, what they don't want to see. So all of the work that they've done can be given to the developer and worked in tandem with the developer on designing what the community would approve of. And then we can sign off on it. Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. When I say giving up control, I'm saying, well, you're not doing X, Y, Z, but
Right.
as you said, you don't, and that's a discretion that if you don't have the expertise to do X, Y, Z
Right.
anyway. But yes, I put that in terms of that collaborative process and the way that, I would recommend doing it is, there would be in the development agreement and a covenant that runs with the land that upon non-compliance with the design plans that are approved by the town, the agreements terminate.
Right, that's what I read in yours. I liked that a lot. I thought that the most recent version you sent us was good. Only have a few tweaks on it, but I like it better for us than the original. I think it's more feasible for us. We don't have, like you said, a ton of expertise in our current town to, manage a project at the scale by ourselves. Albert, do you have questions for Miriam?
I don't. No. I thank you very much. I appreciate your input very much.
Some of the other questions that we had, I feel like you've answered a lot of the questions that we received. The most efficient way for us to move forward, the fastest way to move forward, it sounds like is the RFQ based on what you've been telling us. So that was one of the questions that we had received. Technical difference between the RFP and the RFQ. I think we have a good understanding. Do you guys have a good understanding of the differences between the two?
Yep.
Okay. We understand that with the RFQ, we don't have to have completely fleshed out plans. We don't need designs. We don't need all that done. That would have been more of an RFP thing. So that's something we're good in. All right. Let me see if there's any other questions. No, those are all the questions that I had from the community and Amber. So do you guys have any other requests? Some things that you think that we should include in the RFQ to help it get clarity? Is there any comments?
Just to ensure that design
The
It's
design,
agreed
that we
upon.
get to sign off on
That's
the
all.
design.
Yeah,
that-
that's
I know the Community Housing Board has worked on that a lot, so
Yeah.
that needs to be part of it.
Right.
because they did hold all the meetings with the public, and the public
Mhm.
certainly had some strong opinions.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
We need to do what we can to protect those strong opinions.
They've done a lot of work on this. Does anybody in the audience have a question? Michael, can you come up?
I think the attorney for the board, sorry.
State your name for the record, just,
I
thank you,
Same.
sorry.
Same.
I know.
assume everybody heard before, but just for the benefit of those who did not, it's Michael Shatkin. I have a few questions for the attorney for the housing.
Mhm.
She is still on.
She is.
It's my own shortcoming, but when I think of an RFQ, I think the deliverable for that is qualifications. Now, after hearing your introduction to this, I understand that it's more than that. You're actually, your criteria for selection would be the qualities or the capabilities of the developer. And the deliverable is the project, the construction and management of the project, development services. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, part of the qualifications that would be set forth would be qualifications, both of development as well as any construction services. You're entitled to see what, who, the construction team, whether or not the team is capable of bonding, financial capability, and you would also want to assess the qualification of management.
So there would still be a requirement for a performance bond. And would the contractor be paying prevailing wage, or is that waived as well under this arrangement?
That's something that I wouldn't necessarily put in an RFQ because, again, that you're focusing on qualifications.
You're focusing on qualifications, but the ultimate thing that's being delivered, it is development inclusive of design, bid, build.
Right.
All three things are packaged together as opposed to the RFP, which is essentially the build component, and the design component is, so in the RFP, it's design is done by one entity, the town bids it, and then a third entity builds it. In this RFQ process, is one entity doing development, including design, bid, and building. Is that correct? And management.
Miriam, I have a clarifying question. So,
Can I get my question
Sorry.
answered first?
I thought she said yes.
Is that a yes?
Well, yes, it would be service. Remember, it's causing construction. So when there's evaluation criteria and there's going to be various bidders there might be not-for-profit developers that are experienced in building affordable housing. That team, in assessing qualification, might recommend contractors that it would engage as part of the proposal, but the developer selected might be a not-for-profit, for argument's sake, because there are several not-for-profits that are amenable and frankly very good at building affordable housing. So the more specific you're going to be on the basis of what's acceptable for a bidder or not may reduce your pool of prospects. Because
So-
affordable housing is a very specialized field, especially when when the bidding is to also include management teams. So someone has to be very experienced in management of affordable housing as well.
You're saying that would be a set of criteria that would narrow down people's ability to bid on this.
You're gonna assess.
For example, whether they have 5 to 10 years experience building a project of this type, you know, whether they're team members or have certain professional qualifications. These are all things which would be a go, no-go as to whether they could even submit for this project.
Right, and I put in, because like I said, in terms of my first draft, I put in fairly, pretty much general criteria. Anything that's more descriptive, that's something that's a policy decision, not necessarily legal. The only thing I could say is as outside counsel is the more specific you are in terms of your criteria, whether, you know, let's say someone, you know, we have, for instance, a requirement that that the bidder has successful, you know, could evidence successful projects. We didn't say deliver specific projects within the east end of Long Island, you know, but
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
In a general way, you're qualifying the team by saying, give us an example of your past performance and have at least this many projects of this type. And by doing all this, we have the advantage of not having a multiple prime contract and other aspects of Wick's law. And I'm not sure what the exact answer was on prevailing wages and other types of labor costs that are associated with publicly bid work. But going back to the question that is of the greatest concern to the community, and I think to the committee that put a year and a half work into this, is to what extent the design work that was vetted with the community, approved by the community, and developed here can be the basis of design for the, I'll say the applicant, the developer moving forward. Can it be a requirement that their basis of design, their proposal in terms of design has to be a further development of what has already been done, not something created out of whole cloth that is completely different from what the community has been exposed to? Is that something that the RFQ can include? And in addition to that, can the RFQ include all of the qualitative discussions that translate into criteria that the building be a sustainable building, that the building follow a set of details which are characteristic of construction and housing? Can
Yes,
all the work that they've
absolutely.
already been done be a jumping off point in terms of qualifications, not qualifications, in terms of where the design starts from and how far it is allowed to stray from the intentions of the building committee? Is that all something that can be rolled into this RFQ?
Absolutely, and you know, you don't have the advantage of having, you know, read even the first draft of the RFQ, but that was the intent of the housing board, and that was my instructions in drafting the RFQ. And you know, in terms of the input, that should even be that'll be further addressed, because we even talk about submitting a proposed design concept, but also stating in the RFQ that the existing concept that the housing board and town accepts is preliminary, and it may be revised further along in the development process. However, it must be approved by the housing board and the town. There's no, just because this is converted to an RFQ, you're, the control of the design process, not necessarily the costs and the bidding and all of that, but in terms of the designs, working with the community, that doesn't go by the wayside.
I'm gonna, I think this gotten some good answers, and I don't want to need to depth any further. What is the conclusion of the developer and management teams? How long do they stay with the project, and when are they done?
Well, management is a long period of time, because because then the management of the affordable housing is a significant period. There'll be, in terms of once the project is built, somebody some entity actually has to manage the units.
How long is that significant period of time?
60 years?
60 years. 60 years, and then it reverts to the town, the ownership of the improvements? Is that correct?
At the end of the lease.
Town does it. The town owns the real estate. So basically the way it's envisioned is that the town would ground lease to a designee of the developer, the land, so that the developer would be building the units, but it would be, and presumably with funding, funding sources, that's generally the way it's structured, because you would want the developer to be in a position to secure financing with the aid and assistance, of course.
It's 60 years, and it's after 60 years.
It's 30 years with the option to renew in 30 years, and then there could always be another option to renew depending on how it's going. Well,
Right.
6 years from now, who knows?
What is the criteria that is expressed in the contract for the condition of the building upon the end, the 30 years and the 60 years? Is the building fully maintained in a like-new condition? Is there a criteria?
I haven't said that
It
yet.
hasn't
That's
been written.
later on in the process.
And it can never be that. I mean, there's
Yeah,
over
that's
30 years of ordinary wear and tear. That's be built into any sort of,
And the last thing is the selection is going to be based upon the developer's fee and qualifications, or one or two, both, or one or the other?
Well, the evaluation criteria, and there is specific evaluation criteria that's specified, and obviously it'll be massaged once people read it, but it talks about the strength of the conceptual representation of the project vision, the expertise in architectural and engineering services, demonstrated cost management. It also talks about housing experience, community housing experience, previously completed projects and compatibility, compliance with all applicable laws, knowledge of Shelter Island vernacular and aesthetic, familiarity with design, wellness, holistic design, eco-green design, experience in leasing and management of affordable housing.
Consideration might also be given to financial differences between developers, what is general conditions, what can or cannot be charged to the project, to flesh out significant financial costs between one developer and the other, because you will not have a total project cost at the time of award. So I think you want to know all those qualitative components about what the building is going to be like when it's first delivered, and when it's turned over at the conclusion. You want a kind of a renewal or maintenance agreement, which people are nodding their heads, so I think I'm covering some familiar ground. And since you won't have a total project cost, and you're going to be building toward that, I think it behooves you to get a general sense of one general conditions or fees versus another set of fees so that you know that the person who is successful is in line with others. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Miriam, just a clarifying question on like process and procedure and all the different steps that this is going to take, just so we can kind of see how it'll roll out. Right now, we have a draft request for qualification. So once we put that out, hopefully we'll get responses, and what we're going to end up getting is a list of bidders with all their qualifications, their history, their experience, what they bring to the table. And then once we receive those initial packages back, what happens? What's the next step?
Well, once the RFQ is issued, I would still suggest having a pre-proposal conference with whoever is bidding, and presumably there would be a selection. Once there's a selection of a selected developer / management team, there'll be two documents that should be negotiated and drafted in pretty short order. The development agreement along with the proposed ground lease, and and the covenants that will run with the land.
Mm-hmm.
So, those are the three things that would be absolutely, critical. And it would have, those are the components develop, and the development agreement especially will have more of the components of specifics of your design, and the details. Although
Right.
as part of the RFQ, you certainly would submit and definitely discuss with all of the bidders what your plan designs are, subject to change. But then the next step would be working on a formal design, having it approved, working with the developer collaboratively, and then entering into a development agreement, ground lease, and the covenants. Then, and in fact, the successful bidder, and it may be too aggressive, is required upon 10 business days of selection to start pre-development activities. So, you do want to keep the developer on the selected developer on a short leash.
Mm-hmm. And then once we have that, so we enter into a development agreement, we work together to develop the design that's going to be built, and then the developer builds said design. And now we're towards the end of the actual construction, and we're moving into more of a management phase. So then at that point, this would kind of convert into a new contract, or is it all going to be built into the original contract, the management portion of it and the maintenance portion of it, like Michael was asking?
Yeah, I would suggest that the management agreement would be negotiated and signed simultaneously, not simultaneously or in short order at the same time as the development agreement. I would suggest getting out all your agreements out of the way.
Yep. All right, that's what I was thinking too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, does anyone have any questions? Any more questions? Phil?
Simple
Name
one.
for the record, sorry.
Okay.
I know, I-
That's okay. From a process standpoint, at this point, as we kind of assumed the RFQ was going to be the way to go, would be the suggestion that we now take the initial draft, which is an initial draft, and try to finalize it perhaps at the housing meeting here in December. I think it's December 12th.
Mhm.
And then give it back to you, but hopefully have whatever input you could give us before the 12th.
Yes.
So that we might have a goal of issuing it in the beginning of January sometime. Is that too aggressive, or does that sound realistic?
Possible, sure.
Everything possible. I just want to know how realistic.
Yeah, well, that I can't tell you.
Yeah, so if.
I think that's pretty aggressive.
to have a week to look at it, make your initial comments for the board, for the housing board, so that they can look at it again with that lens?
What is the end thing you're looking for, Bill, is to get this out?
We want to be able to issue it in January. So my goal would be December 12th at our meeting, hopefully to have had as much input on the initial draft. From that would be another iteration that would go out, but it would hopefully be close to a final. And then you look at the final and say, yep, nay, at the beginning of January sometime, so that it could be issued sometime in January. That would be my goal. And I want to know if that's too aggressive. I think that we have to be realistic in the timetable that we put into the RFQ. I think we were initially too aggressive in the timetable with bidders conferences and other things. But I think to get it out there as soon as possible and to start the process and see if anyone's actually going to do this.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe, how many pages?
It's not that
it's
many
not-
pages.
So it's about 10, 12 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 10 pages, it's
The big
just
thing I think is Miriam
initial
said is going to be
ideas
some of the
back to the committee
criteria.
so they can start brainstorming. Can we
I'm okay.
try to have?
Yeah, I don't want to hold it up by any
Yeah.
means, but I just always want to err on the side of caution.
Caution, yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's more on the timetable going forward. But one of the most important things, as Miriam alluded to, I think, is going to be the criteria. The criteria that's now in there is really a duplicate of what had been in the RFP. I think we need to look at that in a different manner as we go to issue an RFQ.
so can I ask that people get their comments back to the housing board by Tuesday, the 10th of December? So they have
I can do
2
that.
days, you guys, then you can talk about them at the work session, but everybody's comments are,
That's good for us.
Yeah, I
that
think
gives-
that's great.
that gives like a week after, Thanksgiving.
It's fine by me.
All right, so we'll try to have all our comments to you by then, and then we'll discuss it at the Thursday meeting on the 12th, and
Perfect.
try to make sure that everybody's given you solid direction.
Great.
Okay,
Sounds great, thanks.
all right, thank you. So then, does anybody else have questions for Miriam, the attorney? No?
Nope.
Okay, so then the only other question, Miriam, is can you attend the housing board meeting on December 12th? So that we can kind of all go over it together?
Absolutely.
All right, everyone's good with that? With her attending, okay.
Okay,
'cause then-
what time is that? I'm sorry.
It's at 7 o'clock?
I mean, I'll probably have to zoom in,
That's
somewhere
fine.
that day.
And Liz and I would be in touch beforehand.
Yeah, and the committee will reach out to you and discuss things beforehand, but I just wanted to, definitely invite you to attend that if we're gonna be discussing it. It might be easier for you to kind of hear all the discussions around it, so you have a solid understanding of what the committee's looking for and what the board is looking for. So if that works for you, that'd be wonderful.
That's fine.
All right, thank you. And you can let us know if it doesn't work, check your calendar and stuff. I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm just putting it out there. All right. Does anybody else have any questions for Miriam?
No, unless anyone has any questions for me, I think the first draft is workable in terms of the comments so far or the concerns that I hear, but definitely please include your input.
All right, we will do, and I'll bump it in everybody's email so you have it. Thank you so much for your time, and you've given us some great information today. I really appreciate you logging in and working with us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and happy Thanksgiving all.
All right.
Good.
Happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
All right. The next thing we have is board member reports. Anybody have anything to report?
No, it's not much going on.
All right, thank you, guys. There was the volunteer luncheon at the, held by the senior center. at the Presbyterian Church last week, which was a great event. They kind of recognized all their drivers who help with the Meals on Wheels program and the drivers who take people to medical appointments. And it was just a really nice luncheon. It was good to see everybody and have them get recognized. So we really, truly do appreciate all the volunteers who come out for the senior programs because they're what makes it happen.
Yeah.
So that was,
It was a lot of fun. I mean, it
It
was
was
interesting
fun.
for me because I'd never been before, and it was really great.
yeah, it's just such a nice group of people. Otherwise, I didn't really have any,
Nay.
I didn't have anything to bring up from last week, so.
Oh,
All right. Albert, did you have anything?
No.
Benjamin, you didn't have anything?
No.
All right. So I'm going to make a motion to adjourn the work session and go into the special meeting. We have two
Second.
resolutions. All in favor?
Aye.
Um, So the first resolution is, I will read the first resolution. Whereas a wetlands application was submitted by Patrick Loftus Hills and Conan Tam on July 9th, 2024 to remove and dispose of plus or minus 248 linear feet of a failed existing bulkhead and construct 202 linear feet of a new bulkhead inclusive of a 22-foot return and a 33-foot return at an elevation of 9 feet above sea level to install approximately 169 linear feet of stone toe armor and construct a splash zone consisting of 20 to 25-pound stones, a top fabric filter extending 10-foot landward of the bulkhead to construct a 146 linear foot rock revetment inclusive of a 78 linear foot return and excavate approximately 850 cubic yards of sand landward of the revetment in order to create a beach, to construct a 10-foot by 58-foot gravel marl path, to construct a 10-foot by 24-foot stone ramp, to construct a 15-foot by 40-foot stone ramp, to construct a 6-foot by 30-foot marine stair, to construct a 24-foot by 34-foot ramp sand bath, through deposition of approximately 46 cubic yards of sand, to construct a 76 linear foot long stone slope retaining wall of varying width, and to revegetate project. Whereas the property is located 169 Ram Island Drive, Shelter Island, and is located within the AA Nearshore Overlay Zoning District. Whereas the subject property is a 100,072 square foot Gardner's Bay waterfront property with a new dwelling under construction. Whereas the applicants on October 10th, 2023 received a wetlands permit resolution number 29-2023 to demolish an existing dwelling, swimming pool, patios, deck, and to construct a new single-family residence, plunge pool, patio, and driveway. Whereas on December 15th, 2023, applicants received a New York State Department of Environmental Conservation permit number 1-4732-01117/00005 for the project. Whereas on January 27th, 2023, the applicants received a letter of non-jurisdiction from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation for that number 1-4732-0111117/00003 for any project work beyond the 10-foot elevation contour and landward of the coastal erosion hazard area. Whereas pursuant to Town Code Section 60-12B10, the project is a Type 1 action where the town board is lead agency, and as such, the applicant submitted a full environmental assessment form, the FEAF Part 1, which was reviewed by the town environmental analyst, to which Part 2s and 3s of the same were prepared by said analyst, and a negative declaration was recommended. Whereas on October 28th and November 19th, 2024, there was a public hearing held on the subject application where public comment was received and taken under consideration. Whereas the subject application was referred to the planning board, the town's environmental analyst, and the Conservation Advisory Council, and reports therefrom were issued dated October 11th, 2024, September 26th, 2024, and September 20th, 2024, respectively, and taken under consideration. Whereas the town board has reviewed said application with regard to the standard of review enumerated in Town Code Section 29-5, and now therefore be resolved that the town board, based on its review and the FEAF, the recommendation from the environmental consultant, other relevant information and testimony from the public hearing, determines that the proposed action will not result in significant adverse effects to the environment, and hereby adopts a negative declaration, and be it further resolved that the town board finds that the project meets the standards enumerated in Town Code Section 29-5 as inter alia and
Inter alia.
Alia, thank you. I'm like, I did not say that right. An existing bulkhead has failed and significant erosion is occurring. Thus, a replacement of the same is necessary and therefore will not impair but repair the wetlands and the buffer, will not diminish but rather recapture the wetland and buffer, and there are no other practical alternatives due to the failure. And be it further resolved that the town board hereby approves the issuance of a wetlands permit to construct subject bulkhead and ancillary structures located at 169 Ram Island Drive, Shelter Island, Suffolk County, tax map number 710-1-20, as shown on the wetland site plan prepared by Nicholas J. Mazzaferro, PE, dated August 26, 2022, last revised April 16, 2024, and landscape plan prepared by Michael Van Valkenburg Associates, Inc., landscape architects, dated August 6, 2024, subject to the following conditions. Wire backstop fence shall be installed along immediate downslope edge of development and trenched in a minimum of 6 inches and maintained until the building department approves removal of the same. And prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the town's environmental analyst, upon written request from the applicant, shall conduct an inspection and advise the building department as to whether the above conditions have been satisfied. So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Opposed on the grounds that there were no alternative plans submitted that would have less impact on the wetlands.
Okay. Benjamin, you?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Let's do a roll call.
All right. Larson, aye. Diet,
Aye.
Dixon,
Opposed.
thank you. All right.
Me.
You want to do the next
You should
one?
be the official reader of all resolutions.
Nice.
Just got a gift.
I'm not going to sign up for that. All right, next one.
Whereas pursuant to a recommendation from the Community Preservation Fund Advisory Board, the town board is desirous of purchasing 7 South Cartwright Road, Shelter Island. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board of the town of Shelter Island hereby sets a public hearing for Monday, December 16, 2024 at 6:08 PM prevailing time on the potential fee title acquisition for 7 South Cartwright Road, more specifically identified as Suffolk County Tax Map number 700-15-4-135, and be it further resolved that the total purchase price of the subject parcel is $3,900,000 to be paid with community preservation funds.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, I'm going to make a motion to close the special meeting, go back into the work session, and then go into an executive session for contract negotiations. You got a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you, everybody.